Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And welcome into another episode of the Damn Podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network and powered by BeaverBlitz.com. I'm your host, Carter Bahns, and I am joined, as always, by BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado. And today we have another guest on. Eric Machado is part of our prediction podcast here as we go down the Oregon State football schedule for 2022. We may have another Beaver Blitz guest, staffer or two join us along the line here. But the three of us are gonna get started in just a second here. But I want to introduce, of course, Angie and Eric. Angie, how's your final weekend before the college football season going? And did you watch any Week 0 action yesterday?
I did. We watched some. My in-laws are in town, so we're trying to entertain them. And I see the comments here. Connor Johnson, yes. I should have poured myself a nice Sunday Pinot for the patio, but I did not. But we were just up at a winery up here, up in Sherwood. We went and watched a little live band, took the in-laws up there, beautiful view. So shout out to Avidity Wines. But I stopped. I probably should have kept drinking because I would have been really witty and funny. But
she would have picked Oregon State to go to the Rose Bowl.
Oh, yeah, national championship. But no, I stopped. I'm good. But no, I did. I watched a little bit of the Hawaii Vandy game. I watched a little bit of that Nebraska Northwestern game, and then watched a little New Mexico State, Nevada. So kind of fun just to see college football back.
I'm sure Eric was right there tuned in too, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, nothing better than waking up and watching a game in Dublin, Ireland. I'm jealous because I wish we were there. That would be
Wouldn't that have been fun?
Unbelievable.
With a free beer? Did you?
Yeah, because their internet.
That's great timing. Eric talks about the internet being down, and it cuts out.
He cuts out.
Just great.
What's going on here? I just came off the golf course, so it's a little sketchy. But yeah, the internet was down, so they had free beer, right?
Pretty sweet deal.
Well, you better go grab a beer because your internet's not doing too swift there.
I don't know what's going on here.
And hopefully the Nebraska fans were taking advantage of that because
to drown
I'm sure
their sorrows.
They were probably not too thrilled with what they were watching on the field. Scott Frost, of course, getting off to a rough start, and that probably was a make or break year for him. But this is an Oregon State podcast, so we are going to go down the line and pick the result of every game on Oregon State's 2022 football schedule. As I mentioned, we may or may not have a couple of more Beaver Blitz staffers come on and join us here. But for now, the three of us are going to get things started. First, I just want to mention BeaverBlitz.com right now is absolutely the place to be as we gear up for game day and for game week. Angie and I will be down in Corvallis tomorrow on Monday for Jonathan Smith's first weekly press conference of the season. He'll name a starting quarterback. We'll get a depth
Will he,
chart.
Carter? Do you think he will?
I mean, he didn't promise it.
No,
I guess.
Which is just weird. Anyway, we've talked a lot about it, but it's weird that he's not. We all know who it is.
We expect that Chance Nolan will be named the starting quarterback tomorrow when we're down there. But Beaver Blitz throughout the week will have all sorts of preview content, takeaways from Jonathan Smith's press conference. We'll preview the matchup with Boise State, and we'll give our game predictions later in the week. All sorts of good stuff. If you're familiar with what we do at Beaver Blitz, we're not taking anything away, and we're adding to what we did last year. So it's going to be fun, and it'll be fun to get back to the structure of the season. But this is a predictions podcast, and so we're going to start things off before we waste any more time with this weekend's game against Boise State. So Oregon State opened as a 4-point favorite, according to the Vegas, the sports books and whatnot. Right now, it's down to 2.5 to 3.5. You can get in anywhere in that range. And I'm not going to start. I'm going to pass this off to one of you guys to make the pick first. But I think this is one of the more intriguing matchups of the season. I think that line is, I think it's fair being within a field goal. Obviously, home field advantage is considered to be 3 points. So I think Vegas sees this as a toss-up, and I'm kind of in the same boat there.
I completely agree. I think this game is a tough game. I think Boise State's defensive backfield is super strong, and maybe not as strong as Oregon State's, but I think it could give the passing game some fits, especially since we've talked about for weeks, Carter, that Oregon State's really their weakness is the passing game, in our opinion. So if Oregon State's going to have success, it's going to have to be in a dink and dunk type fashion and running the football. I do see it as a toss-up, but I think the home field advantage, and I think this having the extra time to work, I will give the nod to Oregon State to win this game.
Yeah, the 3 points obviously is, home field that's the 3 points, so it's an absolute toss-up. Both teams were 7-5 last year before the bowl games. We lost to a team that they lost to. I think they lost to Utah State also. It's a close game. I mean, yeah, we got to win it though. I mean, Oregon State has to win this game, I think, to start the season off, especially with the following week, which we'll talk about. But they need to get off on the right foot. They need to start the season off on the right foot at home. And I predict that they will.
It's a tough one. I mean, really, I think we all could see it going either way, just because Boise State has always been a tough out, not only for Oregon State, but for the rest of the Pac-12. And it doesn't just apply to Boise State. I think we see it with a lot of Mountain West teams, and particularly last year. I know the Mountain West piled up a pretty impressive record against this conference. So I think, where Oregon State stands as far as, needing to make a statement that it's not, destined for the Mountain West after realignment settles down. It's, if Oregon State really does want to reach that goal of being a Pac-12 championship type contender, this is a game that they should and really need to win. I'm going to give it to them too. I think Oregon State comes out hungry. I think this team is really motivated. They could catch Boise State sleeping a little bit on them. I think, outside of Corvallis, a lot of people aren't necessarily as high on the Beavers as this team is themselves. And I know that the media that covers Boise State is a lot higher on Boise State than they are on Oregon State. So I think Oregon State, in some way, is kind of playing with house money here. I don't think a lot of people expect them to be ultra competitive in some of the tougher matchups that they face this year. And I think this falls into that category. But I do think Oregon State, with that motivation, is going to come out with its hair on fire. And I think at the end of the day, Oregon State is more talented too. So it's not going to be a blowout, and it could very well come down to a last minute field goal, but I see Oregon State pulling this one out and getting off to a good start.
Okay.
Agreed.
All three pick W's.
So did we jinx it?
We're way past jinx at this point.
Yeah.
We'll see. A comment just came in from Chris Conrad saying, to be honest, I'm more worried about Fresno than Boise. And I think I'm in that boat too. Let's use that as a segue to transition into week 2 here. Oregon State goes down to Fresno State, taking the trip down to the Central Valley September 10th.
Wait, I thought that was never supposed to happen ever again after 2001 or whatever, that Oregon State was never going back to Fresno. Somebody did not tell Scott Barnes this memo.
It has all of the makings of a trap game, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They've been back a couple times. Man, there's Steven Jackson year in 2004, I believe. But yeah, that 2001 game was a beyond a trap game when we were ranked number 1 by the
Sports
Illustrated on the
Jinx.
cover. And they ran into a buzzsaw there. We were there. I was there.
I said I would never go back to Fresno.
Never been back to Fresno since, but
and yeah. I'm not planning on going. I think it's it might be the only game that I'm not planning on going to. I haven't decided Arizona State down the line, but I've already got things planned for a couple others. But I don't think any of the BeaverBlitz crew is making the trip down to Fresno. But let's talk about it. So Oregon State, coming off of a tough week 1 matchup against Boise State, gets the team that I think the Broncos are going to be battling with for the Mountain West title in Fresno State. Jake Haener is the quarterback there once again, led a very prolific offense down there a year ago. Jeff Tedford comes back as head coach for his second stint at Fresno State, offensive-minded coach. I think Fresno State's going to be tough.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Carter. I mean, first road game of the year, never an easy place to play. I mean, it's not like it was in 2001. It won't be. But, yeah, people will be excited down there. Tedford, like you said, is back. They went 10-3 last year.
Yeah.
That's a solid team. And going on the road, I don't, right now I'm saying no, they're not going to win. Beavers aren't going to win this game. So.
But you see it being close, though?
It should be competitive.
Yeah.
I mean, Oregon State should be competitive in every game. I thought they were competitive. I mean, they were competitive in every game. And that's what we want to see as a program, this Oregon State program getting to a point where even if they lose, they're not getting blown out. I mean, we were all here the last, Gary Anderson years where it was
the last decade almost
city,
at this point.
Which, I mean, it was insane. But we're competitive now. Losses will still happen, but chance to win every single game. This game at Fresno, right now, without seeing anything, I could change my mind the week of the game, but right now, I don't see a victory.
Yeah, you don't have to go too far back in Oregon State football history to find blowout losses to Mountain West teams. I think back to the season opener at Colorado State back in 2017 when Oregon State lost by about 3 or 4 touchdowns. I don't see this being a blowout by any means. In fact, Oregon State could very well, if not win this, lead for most of it. I think it's going to be competitive. It's going to be a tough environment, going down there playing in potentially 100-degree heat. There should be a decent contingent of Oregon State fans, but I do think that Fresno State fans show out. That campus, that university, and that stadium are all deceptively actually quite large, very comparable to Oregon State. So it's not an easy environment. It's a team that poses a lot of matchup problems, and I think offensively is still going to be pretty tough this year. So I'm going with a loss as well. I just think, it's tough to look at Oregon State's non-conference and say that they're going to win all 3 of those games. And if I'm going to be forced to pick, a loss in one of those 3, I think it's most likely to come in Fresno.
I had a loss too. I don't really have anything else different to add. So all the reasons you guys both mentioned, it's going to be a tough road game. They're going to picking a loss.
And just to clarify, we did not compare notes.
We did not.
No. So I have no idea what these other 2 are.
We just happen to be like-minded individuals here for the first 2 weeks. I have a feeling there are going to be a couple of divisive games coming up here.
I think the third week we probably all agree as well with moving into Montana State.
We probably don't need to spend a ton of time on this one, but Oregon State does get somewhat of a comfy landing coming back to the Beaver State after that tough road matchup. This game against Montana State on September 17th will be played in Portland at Providence Park. So it's a neutral site game, but still counts, I believe, technically as a home game for Oregon State. I don't think this goes down as a neutral site game, even though they're not playing in Corvallis. But Montana State comes in after finishing as the FCS national runner-up last year, made a run all the way through the FCS playoffs and lost to North Dakota State in the championship game. Didn't put up a huge fight in that game, but North Dakota State I think is still head and shoulders above most programs in FCS. But that doesn't take away anything from last year's Montana State team, which was considerably better than most of the other competition that came out of that level. So I think it makes for one of the tougher FCS matchups this year. They have a lot of talent coming back. As far as FCS recruiting goes, they have recruited very well. And that program has consistently been very good. So this shouldn't be a pushover, but Oregon State should still win comfortably. This is an FCS program. They're playing, scholarship limits, you name it. It's a Big Sky team. Oregon State should win and should win comfortably, but don't be surprised if at halftime the Beavers maybe only have a 7 or 10 point lead, but I will take a win here.
There's a lot of guys. I mean, Jeffrey Manning's still on that roster. So, this is a team that has some former, Power 5 guys that just went up looking for playing time. So still some talent. And I would say some pretty decent talent when you're looking across the board, but I pick a W as well.
Yeah. FCS always a little bit of a concern. We've seen losses before. Every year there's losses, not from D1. I always call it D1 and 1AA back in the day. But we've Oregon State has lost to Montana's, and they lost to a Sac State, which was the worst loss in program history, in my opinion.
I was there for that one.
Yeah, yes.
I saw them lose to Vernon Adams.
Not
Cooper
that I'm
Cup,
saying that that's going to happen here,
Yeah,
but
Eastern
Montana
Washington.
State was
That
10,
Eastern
12, and
Washington
3, as
game.
Carter said. They were runner-ups last year for the championship. Eastern Washington has been a solid team in that league for years and years that Oregon State has lost to. Oregon State should win this game, absolutely. And at this point in the program, in Jonathan Smith's tenure, they should win this game. So they'll come out with a W. Like you said, Carter, it could be closer than we like.
And again, like we said with Oregon State and Mountain West teams, you don't have to go that far back to see Pac-12 teams losing to FCS teams. I mean, last year alone, Arizona lost to Northern Arizona, Washington lost to Montana, two teams that weren't necessarily vying for a Pac-12 title like Oregon State hopes to this year. But again, these upsets do happen, and Oregon State fans know all too well.
I don't like the matchup. I don't know why, a Power 5 team, because there's nothing in it for a Power 5 team, for an Oregon State, and the, Montana States of the world have everything to gain. It's like their Super Bowl. So, I'm not a fan, but hopefully it's a good tune-up for USC the next week.
Do you guys like that they're playing it after two Mountain West teams? Because I know, oftentimes teams will schedule an FCS opponent in week 1 as kind of a welcome back to football type thing. Here's your ramp up. But Oregon State, in a way, gets, they kind of get thrown into the fire against Boise State and Fresno State. And then after that, they have this FCS matchup, which has kind of been how Oregon State's done it in the last few years. Do you prefer that, or would you rather have that quote unquote cupcake matchup in week 1?
I like the way this is set up better, just because it gives you that motivation during fall camp and right out the gate to be ready. I think it, when you play a cupcake right out of the gate, it kind of can just let bad habits kind of linger, and they're going to have to come out ready to play Boise State so they can get some of that stuff. I don't know. Then you have the SEC, who plays like 3 cupcakes a year. So
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can always have the cupcake debate, but, no,
I think sound good, by the way.
Especially coming off of, if they do have a loss at Fresno, there should be no excuse to overlook anybody at that point. And, coming back, playing in a different location, Providence Park's going to be a bit of a different setup for football.
And don't count out the Montana State fan base. I think they show up pretty well for that.
Absolutely. Game. But, Oregon State should win this game. Jonathan Smith's 5th year in the program. So
yeah, that brings a close to the non-conference portion of the 2022 schedule. Oregon State, they start the year with tough matchups against the Mountain West, and then conference opens with another couple of really tough games as well. I think Oregon State plays arguably the 2 best teams in the Pac-12 back-to-back weeks to open conference play. The first of those being USC, which comes into Reser Stadium, currently ranked number 14. Obviously, that will probably change between now and September 24th.
And what have they done to deserve a 14th ranking?
So the transfer portal and
what the hell?
It's the transfer portal and Lincoln Riley. I guess. But USC. The Trojans come in with, they'll be, speaking of hostile environments, I think Reser, even at half capacity, with the west side being closed off during construction, the Oregon State faithful is not going to make this game easy on the Trojans. I think Oregon State fans have felt very marginalized during this whole realignment period because of what USC has done. And part of that, I think they're going to take their frustration out on a USC team that is probably in all reality making its last trip to Reser for the foreseeable future.
School will be back in session. It's going to be rowdy. And like you said, probably the last time we see USC in Reser Stadium. I'm going to go out on the limb. I think this is a win for Oregon State. I think they finished that non-conference 2-1. I think they're re-energized when USC comes to town. And I think we see the Beavs firing on all cylinders. And I think they kind of take the Trojans behind the woodshed. And I think it's a I don't even know if it's going to be close. I actually think Oregon State will roll in this game.
It wasn't close last year, that's for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't call. No, I'm not calling for anyone taking anybody behind the woodshed in this game, especially Oregon State. But I do like the matchup. I think it's crazy that they're ranked where they are. They went 4-8 last year. They, 3-6 in conference in a weak. I mean, what would be considered a weak conference, right?
Yeah.
If Lincoln Riley flips that to a 10-2, 9-3 season, that's he is
he's worth every
coaching.
penny. Yeah,
absolutely. But normally, I mean, that would be an amazing turnaround. I think they're still early. New system in place. Clearly, new quarterback. I think we catch them at home and pull out the victory. I think
catching them early, like Eric said, I think catching them early before they maybe have had complete time to gel. It is the same defensive line that they had last year that Oregon State was able to run on. I think
one interesting thing is they play Fresno State the week before. So we play Fresno and then they play Fresno at home. They get them at home and then they play and then we play. So we'll have at least a comparable prior to that week.
We can play the whole numbers game where, Oregon State lost by this much, USC won by that much. How does that compare?
We win the national championship.
Yeah. So the Machados are both going with a win here against USC. I can see it, particularly because Oregon State already did it last year. But I just think that this USC team is so different already from what Oregon State saw last year. That number 14 ranking, it's too high in my book. But I do think that picking USC to finish in the top 3 or 4 in the conference it's probably where it belongs.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley, coaching wise, just what he brings to the table right away is so much more than USC ever had with Clay Helton. And of course, when Oregon State faced him last year, Dante Williams was the interim. Lincoln Riley is, head and shoulders above them as far as coaching ability goes. And then I think what USC did in the transfer portal this year, landing the number 1 transfer class, getting Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, Travis Dye. I mean, 3 guys at their respective positions that are considered to be among the best in college football. Those are huge additions. They also get Brendan Rice from Colorado, who was the Buffalo's leading receiver last year. That offense is going to be so much better than it was last year. They have some veteran guys on the offensive line. So I think USC is going to score a lot of points this year. As I noticed, we just lost Eric.
We lost Eric.
Hopefully we get him back here in just a second. But there he is. I'll pop him back in. He's laughing. Welcome back.
Well, you left us.
All right.
No, I think this USC offense is going to be a lot better than it was last year. To Angie's point, the defense, I don't think saw the upgrades via the portal that the offense did. So Oregon State should be able to score the ball. It could be one of the more higher scoring games on Oregon State's schedule. I just think, USC, they'll have the motivation of last year. They have more talent. If Oregon State is going to lose a home game this year, it's this one. Oregon State, of course, went undefeated at home last year. I'm picking that streak to end in this game. But I could see it flipping the other way. I do think it's a very winnable game for an Oregon State team that has Pac-12 title aspirations.
Okay.
But the following week, Oregon State gets another really tough test, going on the road for another Pac-12 South crossover game at Utah, which enters the year ranked number 7. So they open the month of October 1st at Rice-Eccles Stadium. That place is going to be electric. I'll be there. I'm really excited to see that place. I know that student section's insane, and they're probably going to sell out every game this year after their Rose Bowl run last year. I'll start this one. I'll throw it off to Angie here. I think we all kind of have a similar read on this one, but let's hear your opinion.
I think Utah. I picked Utah to win the Pac-12. So I think this is a solid team. Whittingham always has them ready. I love Cam Rising. I think he's a great quarterback. I don't think the Beavers can. I think it's road game. I think those are tough regardless. So I actually have this as a loss for Oregon State.
Yeah, it's like we are married or something.
We never talk football. Never.
I'm in agreement. Returning quarterback on the road. Road games are if you're 50-50 on the road, that's a solid year.
Yeah.
Against a team that's, like you said, Carter, ranked number 7 preseason, legitimately, I think, returning starter, solid coach, altitude, so, home field advantage. If Oregon State pulls this game out, it could be an amazing season, theoretically, but I don't see it at this point. And I think it's going to be, they're not going to win.
Oregon State, of course, did pull it off last year at Reser. They were the only Pac-12 team to beat Utah. And, I think on paper, a lot of people think that last year's Utah team might be better than this year just because of, you look at some of the talent they lost. I mean, Devin Lloyd was one of the best linebackers in the country, a first-round draft pick. They lose some other playmakers from that team, but most of the offense is still intact. That defensive line is still intact. So I don't see Utah dropping off as much as some other people are. And I think they really earned a lot of respect across the college football world last year. I think you've seen, Utah really be predicted to be a contender for the college football playoff. And to Eric's point about them being deserving of that number 7 ranking, I think it says a lot that, Utah is entering the year as a top 10 team in both of the polls. So everybody
Roger
else
makes a good point in the chat that the Utes will want some payback too. Absolutely. I mean, that was their one loss, a conference loss, was to Oregon State, and they're circling that game. I can guarantee you.
If it was a home game for Oregon State, I still don't know that I would necessarily predict a win, but I think it makes it all the more winnable if you're playing at Reser. Obviously, we saw that come to fruition last year. That was when Luke Musgrave blocked that punt and returned it for a touchdown. That was the loudest I have heard Reser in a long, long time. But you're going to get, Rice Eccles, it's going to be louder than that on every play. You're playing at altitude. Utah is just a physical, brutal team to play against, and I don't think Oregon State comes out of that one with a win. So that's kind of the, Oregon State's schedule, I think, is really front loaded. And that wraps up the first 5 games, which I think is where Oregon State faces its toughest tests. As we move into here to really almost the second half of the season, I think you start to see a lot more favorable matchups. And the first one of those that comes after Utah is a road game at Stanford. Another one that I already have my flight booked. I'll be there for BeaverBlitz October 8th. At Stanford Stadium, which is basically a home game for Oregon State. I expect that I will see a lot more orange than Cardinal down there. A team that Oregon State finally, got over the hump and beat last year after a decade-long losing streak. I'll start this one off with my prediction. I think Oregon State wins this. I think generally lower on Stanford than some other people. Stanford, in my opinion, across the board was one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 last year. Their record largely reflected that. And I don't think that they've really done much to improve. I know at quarterback they're set, but outside of that, I just don't see enough talent on that roster to compete in the Pac-12 at the level that obviously we've all become so accustomed to Stanford competing at. So I see this being another disappointing year for Stanford, and I think Oregon State gets its first road win of the year on October 8th.
Eric, you want to go?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Carter. I'm hopeful Stanford's back in the 2000s era when, yes, you go down to their stadium and there's about 5,000 Stanford fans and 10,000 visiting fans, and a ticket costs $10 off of StubHub. But 3-9 last year. They did not look good almost in any aspect. You're right. What have they improved something? David Shaw has done a nice job there and somehow kept them at a very high level, for a while. I don't know how. I've never personally been that impressed with the way he coaches, but they do get some athletes. They get these huge receivers. They get these huge tight ends that are uber athletic, and that's always posed a problem for Oregon State. And it doesn't seem like they have quite that anymore. So I think Oregon State pulls out a win down there.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with a W as well. Just this is not Stanford of earlier in this decade. And I think Oregon State is going to match up well with them. I think Oregon State's defense, from what I've seen, is we're going to see that fast, physical defense that maybe we saw 10, 15 years ago from Oregon State, and it's going to give Stanford fits. So I think the swagger's back on that defensive side of the ball, and it's going to help Oregon State a lot this season. So I'm going with the W too.
Stanford is one of the few programs, I think, that has actually really been hurt by the transfer portal era, the early signing period. As far as admissions to that university goes, it is very difficult for them to bring in transfers because you have to be admitted to the graduate school. And it's very difficult for them to bring in student athletes in the early signing period because they don't admit students until, the January, February of that year. So their recruiting actually has kind of tailed off. I think they rebounded last year, if I remember correctly.
Well, and the other thing that they do, I mean, they get these really smart kids, but a lot of those kids are done in 3 years. So then they can transfer when maybe they're at the peak of their career. So that's the other thing too. Their guys are going out, but guys aren't coming in.
I think I wouldn't necessarily call it a downfall, but the down years we have seen at Stanford have really correlated with the implementation of some of those two new things in college football, that have really impacted the personnel side of things. But Oregon State returns home from its 2-week road trip on October 15th for a game against Washington State. And I just mentioned that Oregon State snapped a decade-long losing streak to Stanford. It did the same thing against Washington, snapped a 50-year losing streak at the Coliseum last year. All of these things came to an end, but the one that Oregon State just cannot get past is this losing streak against Washington State. Another land-grant school in the Pacific Northwest, out in the middle of farm town, small college town, all of these similarities, except Washington State just has outplayed Oregon State on the field for really close to a decade now. And I think Oregon State the last couple of years has lost a couple of games that it felt it should have won. 2 years ago, it kept them out of a bowl game. And I think this year, Oregon State is decidedly the better team. And at home, I would hope that the Beavers could take care of business against the Cougs.
So you're going with the W?
I'm picking a win here.
I am too. W for sure. I feel like last year too was a game that I don't even think the team lost so much as the play calling down the stretch. The offensive play calling was horrendous. So no, I think Oregon State pulls off a win. It's a home game. It's a win.
Yeah, I see the same thing. I mean, Washington State, new coach, although he was there for much of it last year, kind of a feel-good story there with him being promoted. But new quarterback, lost, Delora left. They're bringing in a new quarterback. I see that most pundits have them ranked higher than Oregon State. Yeah, home game. Oregon State, first of two in a row at home, coming off of Stanford, which hopefully will be a win. I see them rolling back into Reeser with some mojo and getting that decade-long WSU monkey off their backs.
I mean, dude, it's the Cougs. They've got to win.
Yeah. I mean, Eric, you mentioned this home field advantage, and I think for so long, Reeser hasn't been near 45,000 fans, and it won't be this year, of course, with only half of the stadium in operation. But Oregon State didn't lose a game at home last year, and so whatever there is something there to this home field advantage, and so it's this year to pick all of these home games as wins. I don't think it's far fetched.
No, and yeah, Carter, I think exactly. I mean, people overlook. I don't think people overlook it. I think fans overlook the advantages of home field and the difficulties of going on the road. Because home field, it's you're sleeping in your own bed, you're having your same routine. You go on the road, it's a new place, different routine, and it shows. Best teams in the country don't win 100% of their road games. If they win 50 to 75, that's a great year typically. And so conversely, Oregon State should win their home games at this point, and because it's harder for the WSUs to do that.
Washington State and Oregon State, I think, are two teams that are going to be battling for taking that next leap in the Pac-12 standings. I think two programs that are on the rise. Oregon State, of course, coming from a lower floor. Washington State just, had some turbulence the last couple of years. And I think they're kind of getting back on track under Coach Dickert. So this game, I could see being the decisive factor in which team finishes fourth and which team finishes fifth, or, which is fifth, which is sixth. I think it'll have some bowl implications in that way. But I do see Oregon State with the win here. Oregon State's last game before its bye week comes on October 22nd. This is another home game. So Oregon State with 2 home games in a row to finish out October. Colorado comes to town as my pick to be the worst team in the Pac-12 this year. I see Arizona leaping them, actually. Yeah. I think Arizona played really hard for Jed Fish and is going to surprise some people this year. But Colorado, this is a game Oregon State should have won last year, and it's the game that got Tim Tibesar fired. Before I make my pick, which I think is very obvious, I'm going to pass this off to one of you guys.
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, how many games late was that firing? Carl Durrell couldn't win at UCLA. I don't see how he wins at Colorado. Their record was, they're 4-8 last year. I think they were a little tougher than that. They took A&M to the wire.
Yeah.
Lost early.
That was in Boulder, though.
It was a neutral. Well, it was in Denver, wasn't it?
Denver.
Probably
okay.
Denver.
Yeah.
But he couldn't win at UCLA with all of their talent, and I didn't see anything. And defensive, minded at some level, no offense. Oregon State at this point in the season, that should be 2 straight wins, 3rd straight win with Colorado.
I'm just going to say Buffs are bad. That's it. BAB, Buffs are bad. Bees win. That's my Lee Corso.
That's all. Put on the Oregon State headgear. Angie going full Lee Corso on us.
Going Corso. Are you going to give me a not so fast, or are you going to agree?
There's no not so fast here.
I would, if I'm Corso, I do the not so fast.
Outside of Montana State, this should be the most potential. This should have the biggest potential for a blowout win. I could see Oregon State winning this by 28 points or more. I just think Colorado is that bad. The only reason Oregon State didn't win last year was because the defense at that point was just so brutally bad. I think, if we're being completely honest, Oregon State's defense was just terrible in that game. Colorado had
game too.
Yeah, Colorado had
two. Little things, but yeah.
The Buffaloes had one of the worst offenses in the entire country last year, and Oregon State let them score about 35, and of course that game went to overtime, and it really was a real letdown. I think Oregon State was really
Buffalo's offense was so bad it got Tim Tibesar fired. Finally,
yes, finally, right? But that we should not see that this year. It's going to be a completely different game on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And Colorado, I expect to be improved, but I agree with you, Carter. This should be the game this could be a game where it's not super close.
After that, Oregon State goes on a bye week. It'll be a nice little week off for everyone. I think the bye week comes at a great time. You're entering the home stretch. It's right before October. Get some guys healthy. So I think that comes at a good time. We'll get to the second part of the conference schedule here in just a second, but I want to remind everyone, BeaverBlitz.com is the place to be during Oregon State's football season. We have so much great content planned this year. Angie and I actually just met on FaceTime the other day to plan things out. We've got our daily, content plan good to go. We'll both be in Corvallis on Monday for Jonathan Smith's presser. We'll have all sorts of stuff coming from that. Interviews with the offensive and defensive coordinators and players throughout the week. And then our staff picks on Friday. Peter and Raju, we were hoping to get them on the pod this week. We'll have them send their predictions when we're done, and we'll get that up on the site. But we expect we'll have at least a couple of smackdowns from them this year. Of course, one of the fan favorites on Beaver Blitz. But throughout the season, nobody's going to have more content than BeaverBlitz.com. Our whole staff is going to be hard at work, and we're gearing up for what we think could be a pretty special Oregon State football season.
Gonna surprise some people.
The Beavers return to action to begin the month of November on a Friday night in Seattle. This is Oregon State's one Friday game of the year. Originally, the season finale was also scheduled for a Friday, but that Oregon game has been bumped to Saturday. So the one Friday night game this year comes November 4th at Washington. It's a 7:30 p.m. kickoff. It's going to be freezing. It's going to be wet. It's going to be windy. And it's going to be pretty hostile. I think the weather and the fans up there in Seattle, that combination is not going to make this a fun game for Oregon State to play. So I'm curious, because I think Oregon State's the better team here. I'm curious if you guys think that those kind of outside factors make up for some of the deficiencies that the Huskies have entering 22.
If Oregon State was not coming off a bye, I might feel differently. But I think the bye, being Jonathan Smith's former team, that he spent so many years up in Seattle, I think this one's going to be some motivation factor. And with that bye week, I think they spend a little extra time. I think it will be tough. I think it will be hostile, and I think it could go either way. But I do think the Beavers are going to come out and surprise the Huskies on this one.
Yeah, I do like the bye, but I don't like the road game. I think we have 5. I'm just looking at this. Oregon State has 5 road games this year. Depending on where UW is at this point in the season, they were 4-8 last year. I think they'll be improved, so the fans will be back to some degree or more engaged. I'm going to call a loss. I do like the bye for us. I think it's probably going to be a close game, but right now, road game, night game, Friday night, like you said, bad weather. I'm calling an L.
A little windy on the back porch there, Angie.
Yeah, it is.
What's your take? Does Oregon State go up to Does Oregon State go up to Seattle and pull this one off, or is Washington improved enough and is that environment hostile enough to hold the Beavers at bay?
Oh, I'm calling a win.
Okay.
I think the bye week, I think that's the difference maker. I think the Huskies are way improved, but I just don't think they're quite there yet, especially at quarterback.
Chris Conrad says in the YouTube chat, shout out again to everyone watching us live on YouTube. We really appreciate the support that we've gotten there in recent weeks. Numbers through the roof, and we really thank you guys for that. Without Jimmy Lake, I think UW will be a lot better, says Chris Conrad. I wouldn't be surprised if the Dogs go 8-4. Some of the metrics out there and some of the media, the folks out there that are voting on preseason polls and ESPN with its FPI, pretty high on UW, and I can see why. There's some talent there. Washington has recruited very well for a long time. They bring in a proven coach in Kalen DeBoer, a proven winner. At the NAIA level, he won something like 60 games with like 5 losses, something crazy like that, and led Fresno State to a couple of good seasons, had some success at Indiana as offensive coordinator. He brings in Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback from Indiana, who he named as the starting quarterback. Dual threat ability. I'm curious to see what he brings to that offense. I don't know if the Huskies are going to show dramatic improvements on that side of the ball, but it would be tough for them to be as bad as they had been in the last couple of years under a staff that pretty much, to be honest, it looked like it didn't even know what it was doing on the offensive side of the ball. So I do think the Huskies are going to be better. I've kind of touched on the environment up there just being really tough. Oregon State last year needed a last-second field goal to beat a Washington team that was really down. Oregon State historically hasn't had a ton of success against the Huskies, and I think you just add all of those factors together, and it makes for a pretty tough game on the road. I do like that the Beavers get a bye week right before. Oregon State has really played Washington tough under Jonathan Smith's leadership. I don't know how much of that comes back to his familiarity with the program, but at some point, that familiarity doesn't mean too much when the guys that you recruited aren't even there anymore. So this year, I do see Washington winning this game, getting back to its winning ways in the series. But I think Oregon State has a pretty good shot of pulling off this win. Again, as far as road wins go, I still think Stanford's the most winnable. This is probably the second most winnable, but I am going to pick the Huskies here. After that Friday night trip to Seattle, the Beavers returned to Corvallis for their penultimate home game of the year, a November 12th matchup against Cal. Who wants to start this one off?
Eric, you want to go?
Sure, Cal.
Cal.
Oregon State should always be Cal at home. At this point, Cal's what's Wilcox in his 20th year there? Feels like he's been there forever.
Probably too many years, to be honest.
Yeah.
But they have no money to buy him out, so.
Yeah, they have a lot of issues, I think. They went 5-7 last year, competitive in most of it. But road game for them, home game for Oregon State. Oregon State, in my prediction, coming off a tough loss at UW, is going to have, be refocused and comes back at Reeser over Cal with a win.
Okay. Cal, I mean, they just lost their star defensive lineman. He's out for the season. So, I think I'm predicating a lot of my predictions on how strong I think the Beaver defense is going to be. And I think this is a defensive battle in some regards. But by this point in the season, I think Chance, Nolan, I think the running game is going. I think Damian Martinez is the starter by this point, and he's running through people. I think it's closer than Beaver fans want this Cal game to be. It's going to be family weekend in Corvallis, so it'll be busy. I think it's going to be, like I said, closer than Beaver fans and the media think it will be. But I think Oregon State, it takes off another win, just a close win for the Beavers.
You mentioned a defensive battle, and I think it's interesting to look at the scores of the last few matchups. We think of Oregon State's defenses as being borderline abysmal at times over the last couple of years, and certainly, not good. But year in and year out, Oregon State and Cal have gotten into these defensive battles where it's first to 21 points wins, first to 28 wins, which I think is only a testament to the struggles that the Golden Bears have had offensively under Coach Wilcox. And it's part of the reason that I am very surprised that he is still, at the helm in Berkeley. I don't think Cal is going to get any better offensively this year, losing Chase Garbers, losing some of the wide receiving playmakers that he's had to his disposal recently. I see Cal taking a step backward offensively. I think defensively, they're always going to be good with Wilcox there, and they recruit well to the defensive side of the ball. So I don't see Oregon State, scoring a ton of points against them, but I do see Oregon State probably having one of its best defensive performances of the year in this game. And like Eric said, I mean, to be honest, Oregon State should probably beat a program like Cal at home most of the time. With most of these games, again, you don't have to go far back to where that hasn't happened, but the Beavers have had success against Cal pretty recently. Last year's game should have been a win, if not for the defensive struggles for Oregon State. And I think it's a win again this year. The Beavers then make their final road trip of the year on November 19th, taking the flight down to Arizona State and going to the desert in November. Not a bad road trip. Not a bad time to go to Arizona. Particularly because, weather aside, I think it's a great time to go down to Tempe because who knows what the Sun Devil program is going to look like on November 19th.
Yeah. Will they have coaches? Will there be players? I just think going to Tempe, the Beavers seem to struggle for whatever reason. When it's not a bowl game in Tempe, they struggle. So, but I agree. You said that you thought Colorado and Washington State. No, who was
Colorado and Arizona?
Worst? Arizona were the two worst. I think ASU could be right there just because of the shambles that their program is in. Part of me is picking a loss on this one. Because I think the Sun Devils are going to be wanting revenge after having to come to Corvallis for the past 57 years in a row. But
it really has. I mean, three years in a row, Arizona State has come
in
to
November.
Corvallis. That happens very, very rarely.
Yeah. I just like you said, so much of this depends on what kind of shape this program's in by that point. I mean, they could all be just packed it in by that point, and the Beavers would roll. So. I'm going with a win.
All right.
I was going to go with loss because that one right there has been my back and forth because I really don't know how to gauge that one because of so many unknowns. But I'm gonna. I'll go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, right now we're getting an almost silly season, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so many weeks out, and who knows what the Sun Devils look like, and Herm Edwards, if he's still there by then. I'm surprised he's still there now, given all the offseason turmoil. But they do have a quarterback that they've named who has a lot of experience from Florida, and if they could be an 8-4, 9-3 team theoretically. Last year they were 8-5, so they could, they can do that. Somehow Herm Edwards gets these guys to play for him and has enough football knowledge that translates to victories for the most part. But again, it's a road game. The weather and all that won't be an issue. It'll be November, probably a night game. But Oregon State has historically played poorly in Tempe. Even on great years, we've been down there when they should have won. They were favored to win, and something happened and they lost. So right now I'm calling it a loss.
Now, if you dress up Notre Dame in ASU costumes and uniforms down in Tempe, then I'd say Beavers win and call it the Fiesta Bowl or the Insight Bowl.
Or the Insight Bowl, yes. Call it either one.
Call it. Okay, Carter, what do you think?
Yeah, so Eric's predicting that the ghosts of Eno Benjamin running for 300 yards are gonna haunt the Beavers down there. You say it's a toss-up, but you're going with the Beavs. I think that, Angie, you mentioned that you have one toss-up game that you keep going back and forth with in your mind. For me, that's Washington. I've been going back and forth, and that was the very last game that I picked when I was preparing for this show. Of course, I ended up going with a loss there. And when I made that pick, I said, if Oregon State's going to lose a road game against Washington or, Stanford, it's going to make up for it somewhere. I have confidence that this team is too good at this point to lose multiple coin flip type games on the road. I think this year, if they really are going to take that next step, this is the year where you expect them to win some of those games. And I think they get this one at ASU. And I'm comfortable predicting it just because I don't necessarily know that it's more likely than not that Herm Edwards is fired by then and, the locker room's in shambles. But I do think that's a realistic possibility. And we've seen a lot of preseason predictions come out picking Arizona State to finish in the bottom third of the conference. And I think they're taking that possibility into account. I know ESPN just actually released its power rankings for the Pac-12, and it had ASU as low as, I believe, 9th or 10th. So the floor is very low for ASU because there's a possibility that this program is just in shambles by November. The ceiling, I think, this team has such a wide range of possible outcomes. I could see Arizona State winning 8 games and competing for a Pac-12 title, if they live up to their potential. And to Eric's point, Herm Edwards has done nothing but produce results, even when he's been counted out at ASU. Yeah. But I do think that it's winnable for Oregon State. I think late in the season, Oregon State's going to have a lot to play for this year. So there might be a little more late season, end of season motivation than in years past. And I think Oregon State goes down to the desert and pulls off a win that maybe not a ton of people might see coming, especially if ASU is as good as it could be.
Do you think, Jonathan, so if the Beavers are having as good of a season as we kind of all are predicting, do you think one of the toughest things for Coach Smith is keeping the guys focused and eye on the prize? Or do you think they will stub their toe down the stretch?
I think Oregon State is just locked in this year. The veteran presence that the Beavers have, I mean, they just named 6 captains. They've never done that before. It's always been limited to 4. We have heard time and time again from the staff and from the players that this is a player-led program and that, cohesiveness in the locker room is always one of their strengths. We've heard this in the last couple of years, actually, but this year I think we've seen it the most. This really is a team that is led by a bunch of 5th and 6th year guys, and 7th. I think 7th even with Jaden Grant. So I think that that extra COVID year, this is the year where you're starting to see that really take effect as far as player leadership goes. And so I see this team being locked in week in and week out, all 13 weeks of the regular season, bye week included. And I see the Beavers playing very disciplined down the stretch.
Okay.
And of course, they end the regular season. They wrap things up on November 25th at home with rival Oregon coming into town. Oregon is the third ranked team on Oregon State's schedule right now as things stand in the preseason AP poll. Both of their Mountain West opponents actually received votes, but as far as actually cracking the top 25, Oregon is the third and final team there, checking in at number 11. It's a rivalry game, so anything can happen. So I'm assuming we're probably going to be all over the board on these predictions.
It's a rivalry game.
Is there any other prediction?
I mean, is there any other way to go, Carter? Come on. Beavers by 100. Come on. I picture this. Goal line stand. Tristan Gebbia trots out.
Comes
runs,
back.
Comes back. No, I think this is going to be a great game. And since I have the Beavers actually losing 2 games, and if the Ducks are like, well, you as a Duck fan, and they're going to like have +5 wins because Georgia should count as like 5 wins. So they're going to be like 15-0 coming into this game. This could be huge. I mean, honestly, if my prediction that Oregon State has lost to Utah and Fresno State early in the season, Oregon State will be ranked. Game day, baby. It could be big. I don't know. I don't know if it game day, because that's always big rivalry weekend. But I don't know enough about Dan Lanning. I think he'll be good. I think he's better than Mario, because I didn't like Mario. So and we know I base things on who I like, but I think Oregon did not perform as well as they could under Mario. I still think it's going to be a tight game, but home game. This is where the home field comes into play. I'm going with a very close, maybe even an overtime upset over Oregon in the game formerly known as Civil War.
All right, Eric.
Yes. Overrated as always again. And Dan Lanning might be a great guy. He has no head coaching experience. Mario Cristobal had plenty of head coaching experience, and translated that in 10-4 season last year. Ducks have new quarterback. They have a lot of new pieces actually, and this is end of the season. It's a rivalry game, but home field, it's kind of gone back and forth a bit lately, seems like. But Oregon State gets the W.
The chess match between Lanning and Smith. I'm taking Smith right now because we don't know enough about Lanning.
For those who are watching us on YouTube, you can see that I'm wearing glasses right now. They're pretty translucent. I don't see a whole lot of orange on there. I'm not wearing orange colored glasses today, guys. I think I've picked more losses than either of you, and those orange colored glasses come in handy when you're picking a rivalry game, but I'm not wearing them today. I think Oregon is still the better team here. I know that anything can happen in a rivalry game. I know that Oregon State's beat the Ducks 2 of the last 5 years, but Oregon's a better team. I think they have the potential to win 10 games this year. If Dan Lanning is as good of an X's and O's coach as we think he could be, obviously he took Georgia to some pretty extreme heights defensively. He's going to have a lot of talent.
Have you seen Georgia's athletes?
No, I know. And that's where I'm going with this. I think he has the talent at Oregon to make a lot out of that. One thing that I always worried about, from an Oregon State perspective, one thing I worried about is, Oregon has recruited really well, but they haven't been able to develop that talent and haven't found ways to put that talent in positions to be successful. Well, Lanning is known for being a great X's and O's coach. He was devising these great defensive schemes down at Georgia, and he brought in a staff that has a lot of experience. Maybe he makes the most of what Mario Cristobal left behind recruiting wise. And, that cupboard's pretty full. And so if he comes in right away and implements a scheme that works pretty well, I think Oregon could win a lot of games. I still think it's a winnable game for Oregon State. I think every single game on this schedule is winnable, except for maybe that one at Utah. I'm picking Oregon to win it just because I don't see Oregon State beating all three of those tough teams. I don't even see them beating more than one of them. I've got the Beavers losing this one.
Yeah, Chris Conrad saying if Bo Nix is their starting QB, I like our chances.
I don't think Bo Nix will be the starting quarterback at the end of the year. I think Ty Thompson gets a shot before then. Bo Nix is really just the second coming of Anthony Brown. You know, a guy who has dual threat ability, but is really inconsistent through the air. Oregon fans were calling for Anthony Brown's job last year, you know, halfway through. And I think a lot of them are looking at Bo Nix and remembering what he did to them when he was at Auburn in that season opening game and beat them as a true freshman and thinking back to that version of him. But in reality, he actually hasn't been much better than Anthony Brown was. So I think we see Ty Thompson in this game, to be honest.
Okay. And are you picking the L?
I am.
Dan Lanning was a graduate assistant 7 years ago. He's not the second coming of anybody.
But Oregon fans.
Jonathan Smith was a GA not too long ago.
In the early 2000s.
That's fair.
He was a GA in early 2000s at Oregon State in 2003. Dan Lanning was a GA in 2015.
I do think that Oregon is banking on him being, to your point, the second coming of Lincoln Riley, where you take a shot on a young coordinator who had a lot of success early.
Maybe he does. You know, and if he is, they hit, you know, lightning in a bottle. But the odds are low, especially his first year as a head coach, that he's going to piece everything together and get a 10-win season. So
more often than not, I think those risks play out to being nothing more than, you know, a status quo. This isn't a coach who's going to come in right away and even eventually, you know, be a Lincoln Riley type. You know, those types of coaches, Sean McVay in the NFL. You know, these young guys that immediately have success. For every coach out there that has a ton of success, there's a coach that doesn't, and they're all young at one point in their career. So it is hard to predict that. But that brings our predictions to a close. We're well over an hour here, so we've gone past our hour mark, which we usually strive for. So we're not going to get into the superlatives and, you know, the ceiling and floor predictions that I had planned if we had time for it. But I do want to recap our projected records here. So I've been keeping track. I'm going to hold Angie to her really out there prediction.
Oh, is that what it was?
So Angie's record came out to 10-2, 8-1 in Pac-12 play, and then 2-1 in the non-conference. Eric's got the Beavs going 8-4, 6-3 in Pac-12, and 2-1 as well in non-conference. I've got the Beavs at 2-1 in non-conference as well. So we're all in agreement there, but it's the Pac-12 records that separate us. I have Oregon State at 7-5 overall, 5-4 in the Pac-12, and had we had time for the floor and ceiling predictions, I would have put out there that I think the floor is 7-5. I don't think Oregon State's any worse than 7-5. The ceiling might not quite be 10-2 in my opinion, but it's up there. I think Oregon State could win 9 games this year.
I think the biggest thing is I think you look at Utah, maybe USC, just because of their talent. I don't think they're 14th in the country good, but they just have so much talent. And Oregon, I think those three are kind of up here. And then you have this big chunk in the middle that could kind of go either way. And then you have Colorado and Arizona and maybe ASU kind of down there at the bottom dwelling.
7-5 from me, 10-2 from Angie, 8-4 from Eric. We all see Oregon State going bowling again. Some of us see Oregon State competing for a Pac-12 title. I think it's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and obviously, Carter, you're staying home if they do.
Is that right? Not going to Vegas?
Anything can happen. That's the best thing about preseason, right?
That's my punishment for picking Oregon State to only win 7 games.
12-0 is in the realm of possibility.
You pick Oregon, man. You're staying home, dude.
Hey, I'm trying to be as realistic as possible, and I've got to pick wins. I've got to pick losses. 7-5 from me. Again, Andrew's got 10-2. Eric 8-4. Yeah, that brings. Go ahead.
I just see a small stepping stone this year. Continued building by Jonathan for the program. If he, ceiling 10-2 is possible. Floor 6-6, 7-5, but keeping the momentum going forward.
at the end of the day, we all see Oregon State taking another step forward this year. The fact that we're talking about the floor being a bowl
7
team,
wins, yeah.
Obviously Oregon State last year cracked a streak of nearly a decade without going to a bowl. So that's tangible progress there that we don't see Oregon State being any worse than 6-6. And the fact that we're talking about Oregon State as a 10-2 team potentially with, I think a level of realism to that. I don't think Angie's 10-2 prediction is really that far out there, even though it is, on the higher end.
A little bit.
It is a little optimistic, but again, Oregon State's internal goals are to be a 9-win, 10-win team and compete for the Pac-12 title. But that brings our prediction pod to an episode. We want to thank everybody for watching us live on YouTube. And of course, if you're listening to us on the audio version, clearly you did something right and found our new feed. I have heard from a couple of people that they've struggled to find that. So if you're listening to us on the podcast side, please help spread the word that we have switched feeds, and you can now find us at the Damn Podcast with the subtitle An Oregon State Athletics Podcast. If you see that 24/7 branding at the bottom of our cover art, you've found the correct one. So thank you for sticking with us through this transition of the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network. And I want to thank Eric, of course, for joining Angie and I for this week's episode. Hopefully we'll have you on at some point throughout the season. We've had fun with the guests that we've brought on the last couple of weeks, and always good to get the other BeaverBlitz staffers on the show. We are going to publish these predictions along with those from Raju Woodward, Peter Riley Osborne, maybe even JP. We'll get the whole BeaverBlitz staff on board. And of course, we'll make our weekly predictions on Fridays as part of our in-season content, which is another reason why you should head to BeaverBlitz.com. But Angie and I will be back on Thursday for another episode of the Damn Podcast. We're going Sunday and Thursday throughout the season. And until then, you can follow her at Angie Machado 1. You can follow me at Carter Bahns. And we'll talk to you on Thursday for another episode of the Damn Podcast.